My dad came to Armstrong County in 1904. He had driven a covered wagon through from Tennessee for the Rutherford family. And they started several years earlier than that. He was in his young teens. But they arrived in Armstrong County in 1904. She taught school here. My dad first, he cowboyed on a couple of different ranches down here, and then later on he was county tax assessor and collector after he married. In 1919, we moved to Goodnight. Daddy had a big store there. He sold hardware, furniture, farming implements, and groceries. He just had everything there. The day we moved to Goodnight from Claude, that's the day that the orphans were sent. I believe it is a branch orphanage from Buckner's home in Fort Worth. And the town turned out to see the orphans off on the train that night. And I can remember it. I was very young, but I can remember that. And there were several of the orphans that were given homes around and stayed up here. But I still remember those kids waving out the window.
What was the town of Goodnight like?
It had a pretty nice business part of town there. There were, starting at one end of the street, there was a home-owned telephone service, then a blacksmith shop, then my dad's store, then the First State Bank, two-story building, and the upper floor they had an active Mason's Lodge there. Then there were two cafes, and Ms. Steele, her confectionery, they called it, and the post office was in it. A man by the name of Wood had just a straight grocery store. A man named Bertie Mays had Teal, they called it, but he also sold groceries and boat cloth and that kind of stuff. Then there was a barber shop and a hardware store, a lumber yard back off the block, then the stock bins. And then back off a little further away was a gin. The depot right on the corner. At that time, the highway now goes straight through to Clarendon. At that time, you went to Goodnight, where the highway is now, then crossed the tracks and went on to Clarendon on the north side of the tracks. So right there where you turned back toward Clarendon, there was a filling station there. So it had quite a little. The old Mr. and Ms. Hart, they lived just on up the street, just on the opposite side of the street from where these other businesses were. And it was called a boarding house. I think she only had about one bedroom spare, but she served food, family-style food for anyone that wanted it. And that's about the business part of Claude.
Well,
Claude, I'm sorry, Goodnight.
Goodnight. Tell me a little bit about where you went to school and then what you did in your life. What you did for a living.
Well, I started school in Goodnight. I was pretty smart. I started in the second grade. My mother was a school teacher, ex-school teacher. And I went through the fourth grade at Goodnight. The Dust Bowl and the Depression were both on, and most everybody went broke. My dad did. And of course, Goodnight was drying up, so he couldn't sell the store there. He moved it to Lockney. And we were there through one school term. I went 1 year over there. We came back, and I don't know why. we came back to Clarendon. I went 1 year in Clarendon. Then we came back to Claude. And all I've ever done in my life is ranching. I thought that is the only thing. And started working on ranches before I got out of high school in the summertime. And then later on, I was lucky enough to have my own places. And I didn't do as good as I should have because I was, in the meantime, gone through 2 wars, World War II and the Korean War. That took up some time. But that's all I ever wanted to do, cowboying and ranching.
What happened to the town of Goodnight?
I would say the Depression was the main thing, and of course the Dust Bowl, they weren't raising crops, you know. And people just went broke and drifted out of there. At that earlier there was someone living on every place out in the country, but they just starved out. And they pretty well bankrupted the businessmen in town with credit business, you know. Then, that would be, it was starting to dry up in about 1929 along in there. And quite a few of the people that had lived in Goodnight moved on into Claude. And the little town just folded. At one time, it was pretty nice. There was also a junior college there, in addition to the orphanage, and it was a pretty nice little town.